Well, obviously, Purdue a couple of days ago, yesterday, had a huge win early in the afternoon against Illinois, although that went a while. Purdue ranked in the top 5. Baylor, of course, on the road against West Virginia in a game that tips off in 10, 12 minutes. And Mike Carmen joins us, Lafayette Journal and Courier, about the Purdue Boilermakers. And Mike, thanks for your time. That was kind of dramatic. First of all, I almost forgot they were playing because it was early afternoon and there was MLK Day. But what kind of a gutsy win was that for the Boilermakers?
It was a big one for several reasons. Number one, it brought Illinois back to the pack in the Big Ten. Illinois was the last unbeaten team in league play before Monday, and allowed Purdue to kind of gain a game on them and get back into the race a little bit. Still a long way to go, but you didn't want Illinois to get out there too far. A loss yesterday would have put Purdue 3 games back in the league race, and this is a very difficult league, and trying to string together wins is extremely difficult this year.
So obviously they've got big post play there for Purdue, but is their ceiling going to be decided by their 3-point shooting and their guard play when it comes down the stretch?
Usually is. I mean, that's where championships are won. But Purdue has always played inside first. They've had a string of big men here over the last decade or so. That's where they start things. But the difference in maybe this year's team and as opposed to some others is that they're about 10 deep, and all 10 guys play in some fashion. But they do have some guards that can hit from 3-point range, and they've got also Jaden Ivey who can break you down off the dribble. So they've got a little bit more talent than they've had in the past, but their big guys are good. They're big guys. I think Zach Edey yesterday kind of took a big step forward for Purdue. The 7'4" sophomore kid from Canada going up against Kofi Coburn. He showed a level of toughness and showed a level of confidence that he hadn't really done this year. Bits and pieces here and there, but he took a big step forward yesterday. And if they continue to get that kind of production out of him, other things will fall into place for them.
They had so much early on. They were rolling. I know they had the tough loss to Rutgers, and then they lost to Wisconsin, as you mentioned, the Big Ten, the Big 12 deep, 10 deep. The Big Ten has a bunch of dudes that can play the game and teams that are very, very good. But your overall thoughts about where they were in some cases, number one in the country. We went through that stretch where everyone was number one and they couldn't keep it. Baylor goes 5 weeks and then they get beaten twice. I don't think there's ever good losses, but what did they learn from those losses?
Just trying to close out games on the road. The Rutgers game was Purdue's first true road game of the year. They had played up in a tournament in Connecticut on a neutral site. They played a couple other neutral site games, but you go to Rutgers, and I know that maybe the people listening in Texas don't truly understand how difficult of a place it is. Similar to Iowa State, maybe, where the crowd's right on top of you. And when you get in the conference games, you've got to put teams away. You've got to, when you get that lead, and if you want to consider yourself an elite team, you get that 7 or 8 point lead in the second half, you've got to take that to 15. Purdue didn't do that against Rutgers. They had a chance to do it against Wisconsin. They didn't do it. Now, yesterday, they did have a double-digit lead. Illinois came back, but Purdue's response right after that kind of pushed them forward a little bit. I think they took a step in the right direction, even though the game did go to double overtime. I think that serves them well. So they've just got to, college basketball is just so volatile because you do end up playing multiple games a week. It's very difficult to be on your game every single night. As you mentioned, Baylor has lost twice in the same week. Where college football, you got that one game on Saturday that you really focus on. But it's just a volatile sport from that standpoint. Where it doesn't mean that the teams that lost are bad teams. It's just it's hard to be nearly perfect 35 times, 35 times a year. It just doesn't happen that much.
Mike, obviously the big rivalry game coming up with Indiana, and that's a team that desperate to improve and get back to where they were. What have you seen from them, and do you expect them to put a charge into the Boilermakers, or do you think that this is still early on for Indiana in their rebuild?
Well, they want to because they've lost 9 straight games to Purdue, and that's kind of unheard of. Although Purdue does own the overall series against IU since it started back in whatever farm days there were here in Indiana. But they've lost 9 in a row, and they're eager to stop that streak. And but their issue when dealing with Purdue is that they don't really have the size inside to deal with Edey and Travion Williams. And if those two guys do get going, it's going to be really hard for Indiana to keep up. And the way that Purdue has played IU defensively, how they've double-teamed Trace Jackson Davis, they've forced IU shooters from the perimeter to beat them. And over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, Indiana has just not had a consistent three-point shooting threat. Now, different coach, maybe a different system, maybe a different way that IU will respond to the double teams. Will be interesting to see on Thursday. But Indiana, they've been really good at home. They got a win the other Monday at Nebraska. Was their first Big Ten road win of the year. So they do come in with some confidence, and as I said, they're unbeaten at home. So they'll be charged up, and this is the rivalry. This is the first of 2, and the place will be jacked up and rocking on Thursday night.
Williams 6'10", Edey is 7'4". They have others who are also in that tall, lengthy, angular type thing. Edey has doubled basically what he scored a year ago. Is that the improvement? Is that more of a jump than even Purdue could have expected?
Well, he's made a jump ever since he got here. Yeah, the one thing that I don't think people truly understand about Zach Edey, and probably you're part of the listening audience and that you're part of the country in the Big 12 would not know, is that I believe this is just his 6th year of playing basketball. He played baseball and hockey in Canada, and he didn't get to basketball till late, what we would consider late in his teens. So, Purdue actually thought about and were close to redshirting him his freshman year. But once he got on the floor and they saw his footwork and they saw some other things, like, no, we can't redshirt this guy. He's got to play. And he just, last year was just a big old learning experience for him. He'd never played that level of competition. Here he is playing in the Big Ten. He had some good nights. He had some bad nights. He had nights he didn't show up. He had nights he got pushed around. But yeah, the big jump that he has made is just more of him playing and understanding the game and understanding how to attack a defense. He now can go over his right shoulder and his left shoulder consistently, which makes him a tougher guy to guard down low. So yeah, he's made a big jump in part because he's learning the game more. He just continues to play, and then he's probably due for another jump or two this year. And then if he does that, then obviously Purdue will be in the hunt for some sort of championship, whether it be Big Ten or the national championship down the road.
Mike, speaking to the Big Ten championship, it's early on in the schedule, obviously, but you got 5 teams there in the top 25 with Wisconsin there at 3, Purdue at 6, Michigan State, Ohio State inside the top 20, and Illinois in the top 20 as well. What have been your thoughts on the way the league has looked so far and how you think it's going to look moving forward?
Well, I think right now the teams that you mentioned are probably going to be there at the end. I think Wisconsin is a little bit of a surprise because, if you followed Wisconsin or know what Johnny Davis, did a couple weeks ago, he had 37 at Purdue on a Monday night. He backed it up with another big performance against Iowa, and then finished out the week with another good performance. But he's a guy that came off the bench last year. I'm not sure people really expected this kind of performance from Johnny Davis from Wisconsin, but he's carried the Badgers into the top of the Big Ten, and they've got some pieces around him. And they've got some bigs too that caused Purdue problems when they were here. Michigan State has kind of slowly climbed up. I don't know how much was expected from them at the beginning of the year, but clearly you can't underestimate Tom Izzo's teams. The surprise was they lost to Northwestern at home over the weekend. That was probably a shocker. But Illinois, I think, is one of the most talented teams in the league and one of the most talented teams in the country. If you keep Kofi on the court, with those shooters on the perimeter, now that they have Curbelo back, that's a very dangerous team. So that's in my opinion that Illinois is kind of the team to look out for here in the Big Ten.
I'm still trying to find out how Edey played baseball. That's fine. You see some guys, pitchers are getting taller and taller, but hockey at I know he's got, maybe he had another growth spurt, but I just can't even imagine that tall figure with a hockey stick. I mean, it obviously had to be a personalized hockey stick to be able to fit what he is.
Right. I think if you Google, I think there's some YouTube videos of him.
Oh, I got to watch him. Yeah.
So I think that will satisfy your curiosity.
I will do that. Hey, Mike, thank you. Appreciate your time. Congratulate. I know not you, but the Purdue with a nice win against Illinois to get themselves, as you mentioned, back re-engaged right there into the top of the Big Ten. Thanks for your time, and hopefully we'll have you again down the road.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Mike Carmen, he covers Purdue, football, men's basketball, and all others. He's a lawnmower racing guy. Where's Chuck Taylor's? By the way, he works again for the Lafayette newspaper. We appreciate his time. Now, Baylor has just